You are comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man from Alameda, California, and I am joined today by an old favorite here on these airways, my buddy Barry Bloom, Major League sports writer for MLB.com. How are you, Barry?
Hey, how are you? It's great to be on again.
Thank you very much. You're an additive and I very much appreciate your being a continued guest. Sad circumstances. I'd like to offer my condolences on behalf of Comfortably Zoned. Your dad passed away very recently. And
yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's hard to believe it was 2 weeks ago already. Time just really rushes by.
Yeah. Your son made him, before his death, made him a personalized jersey. He was 86, and you framed it and put it up on the wall. I'm really touched by that. I'm touched by how the continuation of generations goes on, and he was very important in your life. You want to tell me a little bit about him, and if we can relate it to baseball, that's great. If not, tell me about the relationship that you had that helped form you and your life's work.
Well, his name was Len, and certainly easily related to baseball. He took me to my first game at Yankee Stadium in 1960, as I did later on taking my son to his first game. It's a Yankee jersey, and actually Rafi, my son, got it for him for his 86th birthday, which was last April 2nd, and we had a little party in New York, and all went out to dinner at a place called Carmine's. And the jersey was a hit of the night. He put it on that night. We took pictures. He never really wore it otherwise, which is good. It's still in pristine shape. And now, as you said, on the wall of my study and immortalized for as long as I'm going to be living here. And hopefully when I'm gone, my son will take it, and he'll probably buy me a jersey of some birthday coming up about the same thing. But, yeah, my dad was a major influence. We played ball together. He was, one of the guys who was a young father. We used to go out really up till college. We played ball during the weekends. He'd take all my friends and my brother's friends out to the schoolyard, and he was a switch hitter and a pretty good player and a catcher. And he could rip the hell out of the ball. I played third base, and he took my head off a few times with some of his patented line drives. He was a dead pull hitter. He said that when he was a kid in the 1940s that he tried out for the Giants in a local tryout at the Polo Grounds, and actually was selected to be sent down to the lower minor leagues. And as you know, at the time, there was Class B, Class D. You could keep going. Right. Then he was drafted into the Army. He never played. So, sports was one of his multifacets as a writer, musician, and obviously my brother's a writer too, so he had a major influence on both of our lives.
Nice, Barry. Very nice that you remember him that way, and that, your voice comes alive when you talk about him, and I'm very sad for you that you're going through this, but the nice thing, someday your son will pass on both your jersey and your grandfather's jersey to his kids, and hopefully it'll go on from there.
Right. So that's, the continuity and the circle of life, as I wrote about in the eulogy I gave to him a couple of Sundays ago at his funeral. And, one thing is, I'm fortunate, my mother and father, both 86 years old, so we had him for a long time, and my mother's still kicking. So, hopefully she'll be around for a while.
Yeah, nice. Very nice, Barry. What's her first name?
Gloria.
Gloria. So the Blooms done good, huh, in the Bronx?
Yeah, the Blooms did good. My father, his most successful entity of his life, I think, was his family. And he raised two great sons who were with him by his bedside, along with my daughter, till the very end. And he fought the great fight. Didn't want to die. Fought it to the last gasp. I'm not sure whether I'm glad I was there to see that, but I was. And it's just something that will be, and those images of the last few days will be with me for the rest of my life. But, yeah, I was there to talk to him and, spend some time with him. And, as he was going, at least I was there.
Yeah. Barry, again, life goes on, and I'm very, very sorry you went through it. And this is going to be the first spring training that without him for you. Did you have some sort of ritual when spring started, or was...
Not really. They were... my father was always a big Yankee fan, and he went back, used to tell me stories about seeing DiMaggio and Gehrig play. So obviously in 1960, there were some great teams, Yankee teams in the early 60s that, I cut my teeth on. And my mother, who really didn't give too much of a damn about it when I was a kid, became really enamored with being with the Yankees in the mid-90s when they had their resurgence in the Jeter, Mariano, Rivera era. And she's now a devout Yankee fan and watches them religiously. And I had the chance to take her to the new stadium last year. Randy Levine, the club president, is a good friend of mine, invited us both up to the owner's box, and Hal Steinbrenner was there that night, and my mother had a great time. So, it really goes on, and I think actually my mother was a bigger baseball fan now than my father.
Wow.
Still is.
In my life, it was my grandfather, and he took me in 1951. He took me to the stadium. He took me to all three stadiums in New York, Ebbets Field and the Polo Grounds, but he did take me to Yankee Stadium and made sure, I was 5.5, that I got to see Joe DiMaggio, and he pointed out to me, he said, "Ralphie, you're seeing Joe DiMaggio," and he pointed out to center field. He said, "Don't ever forget this day." And he reminded me that he took my mother, his daughter, to Yankee Stadium in 1939, the day that Lou Gehrig retired, and the famous speech, "I'm the luckiest man in the world." She got to hear that when she was age 19 in 1939. So baseball is the thing in my family and in yours that really is the background for it all. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful sport. I wasn't a Yankee fan. I was a Giant fan. But maybe you could tell us a little bit in your own words about those early Yankee teams in the early 60s that you just mentioned, how great they really were. My contention that the 61 team, when Maris and Mantle fought it out for the Babe's record, as it were, that could have been the best team ever assembled. It was just the greatest infield, and 1961.
Well, it's right up there with the 20. It's right up there, I think, with the 27 team, which would be, the only one that would be comparable, and and maybe the 1998 team, which wound up winning 125 games in the extended playoffs. Those three are probably the greatest, certainly in history, in Yankee history, and maybe the greatest overall in baseball history. To have assembled those different groups of people in different eras under different managers, different club presidents, with great Hall of Famers like Barry and Mantle and Ford on the 61 team, and Ruth Gehrig on the 27th team, And then now, Mariano and Jeter, perhaps Posada will be a Hall of Famer, maybe Pettit. There's just great team, great players on all those teams. But yeah, the '61 team. Now, having grown up in New York, and you're a little older than me, so I got to see the Mets at the Polo Grounds, but I never did get to Ebbets Field. The Yankee teams, we went sparingly. As I got older, in the late to middle to late 60s, I wound up going to a lot of their games as on my own in '66, '67, when, they were over the hill. But, really, that those teams went to the World Series 5 years in a row. And, you think about it, the Yankees went to the World Series 10 times in 12 years from 1949 to 1964. And, and won 5 in a row. We're not even mentioning the team that from 49 to 53 won 5 World Championships in a row.
Exactly.
Probably never happened again.
Right, with Rashi and Whitey Ford and Lopat and
Reynolds and
right,
and Coleman and Rizzuto and young Mantle.
Let's talk about Coleman. Jerry Coleman passed away very recently, and Jerry Coleman was probably the best field. I never got to see Joe Gordon play, but Coleman was so slick at second base, and unfortunately, he went back in the service in the early 50s and gave way to Billy Martin at second base. But Jerry Coleman was a big part of that dynasty, the 49 to 53 dynasty, and a true American war hero, a true American hero in every sense of the word. He was just, I idolized that man. He was absolutely terrific. And I covered him, I covered the Padres from like the early 80s, and on to now. Basically I was on the field with them in San Diego covering for the local paper for most of the 80s and early 90s. So I met Jerry personally in the early 80s and his family, and I knew him, very well. And I don't think there's a nicer man that I've ever met in sports than Jerry Coleman. There's nothing I've never heard in peace. Yes. Right. He was a fun guy, never took himself too seriously. My favorite was, as always, as I've relayed this a couple of times since his death, was, when Bob Fontaine got tired of listening to him complain about the managers and put him down on the field in 1980 and said, okay, let's see how well you do. And it was just an absolute disaster. And, Jerry wound up having like 4 or 5 Hall of Famers on that team. Winfield, Ozzie Smith, there, and some of the great old Alomars might have been coming up at that time.
No, not too late. Much later, Alomars. To 1982. But the Alomars weren't until 87, 88. But, he had Gene Tennis, Raleigh Fingers. He had really Randy Jones, and yet that team lost 87 games. And basically he said, always complained about it. He said it wasn't his fault. Fontaine gave him a lousy team. So it was pretty funny.
Yeah. Any memories of Casey Stengel that you'd like to share?
I just remember Casey, more with the Mets than I do with the Yankees, because, Casey's last year was 1960, and I just loved listening to him and reading his stuff. And, obviously he's the author of the platoon system, and he as crazy as he sounded, he was pretty tough. And he was, he was the manager of many of those teams that went to the World Series from 49 on to 1960. Right. The only 2 teams that didn't go to the World Series in those years under him was 54 and 59. So he had quite a record with the Yankees. Aside from Torrey, he's probably the greatest Yankee manager of all time.
It's interesting that you mentioned 1954, Cleveland ended up winning. I think they won like 111 games, won the division by a bunch, won the
Yankees won over 100. Yeah, they won 100. The Yankees won over 100 games that year and didn't even get a sniff.
Right, and that was the most games they ever won, if I'm not mistaken, at least in that dynasty, in that era. They might have won more with Bernie Williams in those years. But, hey, great years, great memories. Barry, if we could segue, there's no real way to segue all of this to what's coming up. A little, it's still hot stove league. Spring training hasn't started. Any predictions for this year? Anything that stands out in your thinking that will shape the season, the upcoming season?
I think it's impossible to predict anything anymore because I'm not one of these proponents of, the Yankees spent $486 million this winter. Did they win the offseason? Does that matter? I mean, we've had a whole record of Angels, Toronto, Marlins, Red Sox over the last 4 or 5 years, teams that notoriously won the offseason, were predicted to win, and then just went belly up, and most of them didn't even make the playoffs. I think all of them didn't even make the playoffs. So so many of these teams now, there's so many question marks, so many players coming back from serious injuries. I think the Red Sox will still be good, but I don't imagine them doing what they did again last year, again this year. It's so hard to repeat in this playoff format with 10 teams going to the playoffs. So many things having to go right. What the Yankees did, even in the 3-tier playoff system, going to the World Series 4 years in a row and winning in 98, 99, 2000, and losing in 2001, and then also winning in 96. I don't think you're going to see that happening anytime soon, if ever again. Now, that might be the last great run by any team. It's more like the Red Sox winning 3 out of 10 years, and that's kind of a dynasty in Major League Baseball, even though they did it with completely different teams. So, I think all the teams, every team, I focus a lot on the AL East and the NL West, and certainly the AL West. I think that there's just a lot of question marks, and all those divisions are just wide open.
Okay. Let me ask you a personal question on being a Met fan. The Mets are rumored to have made an offer to Stephen Drew, the shortstop. And you watched him play in Arizona. You've seen him over the years. Do you think it would be a good idea for them to sign him?
Yeah, I love Stephen Drew, and I'm sorry things came apart with him and the Diamondbacks. I always thought he was a nice kid, and he's a good young player. He plays hard. I think he's going to be a huge loss to the Red Sox, along with Ellsbury, if he does wind up signing with the Mets. They're a much better team with him at short, and he could still play the position. He still hits enough that he can win some games for them. And I think it's just, along with Granderson and what they've done, it's just you're slowly starting to build the Mets back up. So,
boy, that sounds good. That sounds good in my ear. It really does. I see their pitching staff is solid. I see they have a good catcher coming up.
It's a shame that Harvey is after the season, but
yes,
they signed Colon as a stopgap. We'll see what he has left, but I think they couldn't be any worse. So I think
that's the truism. They couldn't be any worse, and I've been hearing that for 50 years.
You've been hearing it for most of Met history, except for the couple of years they won the World Series and went to the World Series. So.
Right. Well, I recently did a show about the possibility of Gil Hodges being inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Right.
former Met manager. He took them to the championship in '69, and I think he was the main reason for that. He saw the potential early on of that young pitching staff and how well they can do. And what do you think about his Hall of Fame, given he was probably for years now, one of the top 5 people not in the Hall of Fame in terms just his playing career? You think he's deserving?
Well, first of all, you split the two things, because either he's going to get in as a manager or he's going to get in as a player. You don't get in as both. So, Torrey just got in, and he's got in as a manager. He has a stellar playing career, and he was deemed as a player by both the Veterans Committee and the baseball writers as being a guy who was good enough to be in the Hall of the Very Good as a player. And I think that's where Hodges is. I think Garvey is in the same situation. I voted for him every year for 15 years. He never seemed to excite everybody. Hodges is not getting it as a manager. He just didn't have a long enough tenure. And, there are other guys who won more and weren't even on the ballot this year with these 3 guys, Cox, Torrey, and Larissa getting in. So, I just don't think it's in the cards for Hodges. I really don't.
Really? Okay. Well, there it is. Barry Loom, Major League sports writer and a terrific guy. Thanks for being here, Barry.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for the kind words about my dad.
Well, my pleasure, and please stay healthy yourself. And
okay, thanks. You too.
I know you'll come back.
All right.
Huh?
Anytime.
Thanks again, Barry. Be well.
Bye-bye.